Grace to you and peace from God who is, who was, and who is to come. Amen. So this week I started listening to a new podcast. A pastor friend of mine recommended it to me. It's called The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. Mars Hill is one of those mega churches that came to prominence and then kind of just imploded. A quick history of Mars Hill. It was founded in Seattle, Washington in 1996 by a small group who felt that they were called to this ministry by God. They're loosely associated with the Southern Baptist Convention, and at their height, they were worshiping over 12,000 people a week. They had 15 branch campuses in 4 states. They focused on family ministry with an emphasis on building up godly males, that those men then might be the guiding force in the lives of their wives and families. The fellow who was the founder and main pastor was very charismatic. He was outgoing. He gave hour-long sermons. I'm thinking about adopting that one. But it also turns out he was a bit of a bully, to the point that in the fall of 2014, after several years, many of the former and current leadership of the church wrote an 11-page letter to the directing board detailing examples of bullying and, quote, patterns of persistent sinful behavior, end quote. Surprisingly to some, the main pastor didn't readily admit his shortcomings, and that his shortcomings led to an unhealthy atmosphere there in the church. And rather than stick around and try to work with the congregation in an opportunity for congregational-wide healing, the main pastor resigned, which in turn did not give the Board of Elders a chance for reconciliation, nor did the pastor's resignation allow all sides to come before the congregation as a whole. So the end result of this hasty departure was that over the course of the next 6 weeks, the board of directors puts together plans to dissolve the church. And on January 1st, 2015, 3 months after the lead and founding pastor resigned after almost 20 years in ministry, the Mars Hill Network shut its doors. So now you might be thinking, okay, that's an interesting story about a bunch of semi-Baptists, but what does this have to do with either James or Mark? So listen to this passage from James. I'm going to read it from Eugene Peterson's translation called The Message. Lead with your ears, follow up with your tongue. Let anger straggle along in the rear. God's righteousness does not grow from human anger. So I'm sure that you've all heard the saying, if you're going to talk the talk, then walk the walk. That's basically what James is saying here, not only in this little section, but actually throughout the whole letter. Don't say that you're a believer, but then don't act like a believer. The author goes on to say it a little bit differently in just a few verses later on, again from The Message. Anyone who has set himself up as religious by talking a good game is self-deceived. This kind of religion is hot air, and only hot air. Real religion, the kind that passes muster before God the Father, is this: reach out to the homeless and loveless in their plight and guard against the corruption from the godless world. Now, I'm sure we're all familiar with another saying, do as I say, not as I do. It's either been said to us, usually when we're a kid, or we've said it ourselves, those of us who are parents or maybe even bosses. Do as I say. And generally the response is, well, you're doing it. And then we give the whole, don't we? Then that's when we say, do as I say, not as I do. Did I see a few of us cringing or nodding our heads? Yeah. James says, nope, that's not going to fly. Do as I say and as I do. In Mark's gospel, Jesus is saying a similar thing. For Jesus, though, it's about what comes out of the heart that's important. Now, Jesus and his boys are relaxing in Gennesaret region. That's up near Capernaum, where Peter grew up. It's in northern Israel. They're healing people and spreading the message of, hey, folks, we should all just get along with one another because it doesn't matter if we're Jewish or Samaritan or Syrian. What's important is how we treat and care for one another. And so in our story, it's lunchtime, and some of the disciples start to eat lunch without going through all of the ritualistic cleansing of their hands. And they're spotted, by some of the religious police who have come up from Jerusalem to check out Jesus and listen to his message. And of course, they see the disciples not following the expected cleansing traditions, and they kind of lose their cool. They get all snarky with Jesus and ask, why do your disciples flout the rules, showing up at meals without washing their hands? And our text doesn't tell us for sure, but I really hope that Jesus' response came without missing a beat. Isaiah was right about frauds like you. He hit the bullseye, in fact. These people make a big show and they're saying the right thing, but their heart isn't in it. They act like they're worshiping me, but they don't mean it. They just use me as a cover for teaching whatever suits their fancy, ditching God's command and taking up the latest fads. And then Jesus turns to the whole crowd, including the religious police, and he says, listen now, all of you, take this to heart. It's not what you swallow that pollutes your life, it's what you vomit. That's the real pollution. So, did you get it, what he was trying to say there? He's saying it's not so much the external influences, it's what comes out of our heart that really shows the measure of a person. Now, that's not to say that constantly feeding on garbage is going to be okay, but that long list of bad stuff that he said, obscenities, lust, theft, murders, adulteries, greed, depravity, deceptive dealings, carousing, mean looks, slander, arrogance, foolishness, all that kind of stuff comes from within. It really doesn't matter who we are or how important we might or might not be. It doesn't matter what kind of life we've lived or even who we've helped in our journey throughout life. It doesn't matter if we've started a church that has led thousands of people to Christ-filled life, or if we've simply toiled away behind a desk, quietly living out our faith. James reminds us that real religion, or as it can also be said, real faith, comes from helping the helpless and standing in faith against this corrupting world. Jesus tells us in Mark that it's what's in our hearts that's important. Sisters and brothers, I would encourage you, serve your God, listen to Christ, do as he says, and as he does. Amen.